An old man hangs upside down on a Roman cross outside the city walls of Nero's Rome. A few miles south, on a different morning, another man kneels at a Roman execution block, hands bound, lips moving in prayer. In a stone Armenian highland, a third man is being flayed alive, while a dust storm gathers on the horizon. And 4,000 miles east, a fourth man kneels in the dust as Indian spears converge on him at sunset. These 4 men are dying for the same reason. They are not the first to die for it. They are not the last. There were 12 of them once. 12 ordinary Galileans, fishermen, a tax collector, a zealot, nobodies, every one of them. And in less than 3 centuries, 12 nobodies had reshaped the entire Roman Empire. Almost all of them died for it, stoned, beheaded, crucified, sawn in half, speared in foreign lands, which leaves you with one question. Why would 12 men, who knew each other, all die for the same lot? 3 years earlier, they had been sitting around a low table in Jerusalem, sharing bread. Then the man at the head of that table was crucified, buried, reported alive again 3 days later. 50 days after that, fire fell on them in a locked upper room. They ran out of that room and never stopped running. 12 men, 12 directions, from Britain to India, each one toward his own grave. And here is what most people never see. The way they died spells out a pattern. Once you see it, the whole story breaks open. I am going to walk you through every single one. Who they were, what they did, and how they died. This is the apostle pattern. The word apostle is Greek, apostolos, and it does not mean follower. It means one who is sent, with the full authority of the sender. These men were not students. They were emissaries, carrying the authority of someone they claimed had risen from the dead. Jesus had hundreds of disciples. He had only 12 apostles. He chose them on a hillside one morning. 12 names, from a crowd of hundreds: tax collectors, fishermen, a zealot, a tradesman, not a single rabbi among them. 3 years later, one of those 12 seats sat empty. Judas Iscariot had betrayed him, hanged himself in a field outside Jerusalem. The field is still called Akeldama, the field of blood. And so, in Acts chapter 1, 11 men cast lots for a replacement. The lot fell on a quiet disciple named Matthias. He became the 12th. But the story does not end there, because a few years later, on a road to Damascus, a man named Saul was struck blind by a light. He stood up 3 days later as Paul. The most violent enemy of the church became its most relentless missionary. He claimed the title himself in his own letter. Paul, an apostle. Not from men, not through man. So here is the canonical list. 13 names. The original 12, plus the late addition who replaced no one. And here is where each of them went. Simon Peter, born in Bethsaida, a fisherman by trade, loud, married, probably illiterate by formal standards. Jesus walked up to his boat one morning and said 2 words, "Follow me." He left the nets in the water. He once tried to walk on water. He sank. Jesus reached down and pulled him out. That is Peter in one moment. At Caesarea Philippi, he was the first to say it out loud. "You are the Christ." And Jesus told him, "On this rock I will build my church." And then a few weeks later, in a torch-lit courtyard, the same man swore 3 times he had never met Jesus. 3 days after the resurrection, on a beach at dawn, Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" 3 denials, 3 answers. Restored. 50 days later, Peter stood in front of 3,000 Pentecost pilgrims and preached the first Christian sermon. 3,000 were baptized that day. He healed a man at the temple gate who had been disabled for 40 years. The man went leaping into the courtyard, praising God. He was arrested by Herod Agrippa. Acts says an angel walked him out of his cell while the guards stood frozen. He died around 64 AD in Rome. Tradition says he asked to be crucified upside down because he was not worthy to die the way his Lord did. His tomb is still beneath the basilica that bears his name in Vatican City. Excavated in 1939, the bones are still there. John, son of Zebedee, the youngest of the 12, probably a teenager when Jesus called him. He left his father in the boat with the hired men and never came back. He is the only disciple specifically called the one Jesus loved. He sat next to Jesus at the Last Supper. He was the only apostle present at the crucifixion. Jesus, hanging on the cross, gave him his mother to care for. Easter morning he ran to the empty tomb with Peter. He outran him. He went in second. He was there at Pentecost. He was there at every council. He was there for everything. After Mary's death, he settled in Ephesus and led the church there for decades. Tradition says Domitian had him thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil. He came out unharmed. So Domitian exiled him to a small Aegean rock called Patmos. And there, in a cave, in his 80s, John received a vision. He wrote it down. We call it Revelation. He died of old age in Ephesus around 100 AD, the only one of the 12 to die in his bed. Remember that detail. James, son of Zebedee, John's older brother, also a fisherman, also Galilean. The two brothers were called the same morning. They walked out of the boat side by side. Jesus nicknamed them Sons of Thunder. Once they wanted to call fire down from heaven on a Samaritan village. Their mother once asked Jesus if her two boys could sit on his right and left in glory. He said no. James was one of 3 at the Transfiguration, 3 at Gethsemane, 3 at Jairus' house. Peter, James, and John were always the inner 3. On the night of the arrest, those 3 fell asleep, while Jesus prayed in blood-soaked sweat 30 feet away. He preached at Pentecost. Like the others, like the rest. Tradition sent him to Spain. Some say he reached the western edge of the Roman world before turning back to Jerusalem. He returned. Herod Agrippa I arrested him. Acts 12, verse 2. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. That single sentence is the entire account. He was the first apostle to be martyred. 44 AD. His remains are said to lie under the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. Andrew, Peter's brother, he met Jesus first. He was a disciple of John the Baptist. The day John pointed at Jesus and said, "Behold the Lamb," Andrew followed. The first thing he did was go find his brother. That is who Andrew is in every story. The bridge, the connector, the one who brings other people to Jesus. When the crowd of 5,000 was hungry, it was Andrew who brought the boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He was at Pentecost like the rest. Tradition sent him north, across the Black Sea, into Scythia, the territory of the Slavic people. He preached on the coast of what is now Ukraine. He is, by tradition, the first apostle to reach the lands that would become Russia. He ended his journey in Patras, in Greece. He converted the wife of the Roman proconsul. The proconsul did not appreciate that. He was crucified on an X-shaped cross. Tradition says he asked for the X because he was not worthy of the cross his master died on. He hung on that cross for 2 days. He kept preaching from it. Witnesses said he was still teaching when he finally died. That X-shaped cross is now on the Scottish flag, the Russian Navy flag. 2 of the largest territories on earth carry the shape Andrew chose to die on. Philip, also from Bethsaida, the same fishing village as Peter and Andrew. Jesus did not send anyone to recruit him. He went directly. The text just says, Jesus found Philip and said, "Follow me." Like Andrew, the first thing Philip did was bring his friend Nathanael, also called Bartholomew. At the Last Supper, Philip asked the question every reader has secretly wanted to ask. Lord, just show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. Earlier, before the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus had asked Philip how to feed them. Philip did the math. 200 denarii would not be enough. He preached at Pentecost. Tradition says he was a careful, methodical teacher, not flashy. In Acts 8, he met an Ethiopian royal official on a desert road, riding home from Jerusalem reading Isaiah. Philip explained the text. The Ethiopian asked to be baptized on the spot. He ended up in Hierapolis, in modern western Turkey, the same city famous for the white travertine terraces of Pamukkale. He confronted a serpent cult in the local pagan temple. The cult lost converts. The priests retaliated. He was crucified upside down, like Peter. Around 80 AD, his tomb was excavated in Hierapolis in 2011. The dating fits the tradition. Bartholomew, also called Nathanael. He is one of the harder ones to track because the Gospels split him between two names. Philip found him under a fig tree, brought him to Jesus. He was skeptical at first. "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" he asked. Jesus saw him coming and said, "Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Bartholomew was stunned. "How do you know me?" he asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." He was a quiet one, not a leader, not a complainer. He shows up in the lists and almost nowhere else. He was at the resurrection appearances. He was at Pentecost. Tradition sent him east, to Mesopotamia, then up into Armenia. He converted King Polemius of Armenia. Polemius's brother Astyages was furious. Astyages signed an order for execution. Tradition says Bartholomew was flayed alive, his skin removed before he was beheaded. His Armenian converts carried his body away by night. He is one of the patron saints of Armenia. Most paintings of him show a knife and a folded cloak. The cloak is meant to be his own skin. Matthew, also called Levi. He sat at a tax booth in Capernaum collecting Roman taxes from his own people. He was the most despised type of person in first-century Galilee. A collaborator, a traitor. Jesus walked up and said two words, "Follow me." Matthew stood up and walked away from the booth that day. He threw a banquet that same night. He invited every other tax collector and outcast he knew. The Pharisees lost their minds. "Why does your teacher eat with sinners?" Jesus answered, "Those who are well do not need a doctor." Matthew was a literate man. He wrote things down. Decades later, he gave us the first gospel. He opens that gospel the way no Greek or Roman writer would ever begin a book, with a long list of Hebrew names. Because he was writing for Jews. He preached at Pentecost. He spoke fluent Aramaic. He could meet Mesopotamian visitors in their own dialect. Tradition sent him south, to the kingdom of Axum, in what is now Ethiopia. He preached at the court of the king. He converted hundreds. He was killed at the altar one morning while celebrating communion, speared from behind. His symbol is a winged man, because his gospel begins with a human genealogy. Thomas, the twin. We do not know who his twin was. Greek tradition just calls him Didymus, the twin. He is best known for one moment of doubt, but he is first known for one moment of courage. When Jesus decided to go to Bethany, knowing the religious authorities would try to kill him, Thomas spoke up. "Let us also go," he said, "that we may die with him." At the Last Supper, when Jesus said, "You know the way," Thomas spoke for everyone. "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" On the night of the resurrection, the other disciples saw the risen Jesus. Thomas was not there. They told him. He said, "Unless I put my finger in the nail wounds, I will not believe." 8 days later, Jesus appeared again, and Thomas was there. "Put your finger here," Jesus said. "Reach your hand into my side." Thomas fell to his knees. "My Lord and my God." Tradition sent him east, far east. He sailed to the Malabar coast of southern India. He worked as a builder. He preached. He built churches and converted kings. Today, 2 centuries before Christianity reached most of Europe, there were already Indian Christians who called themselves the Mar Thoma, the Thomas Christians. They still exist. He was killed near modern Chennai around 72 AD, pierced by spears. His shrine still stands on St. Thomas Mount in Chennai. James, son of Alphaeus. We call him James the Less in age, or less in size, or less in fame. The text never says. We have one fact about him in the Gospels. He is the son of Alphaeus. That is it. He is in the lists. He is at the meals. He is at the road. He is one of the 12. And he says nothing in the Gospel record. Not one recorded line. And yet he was at the Last Supper. He was at the resurrection. He was at Pentecost. Most of the apostles whose mouths we never hear from in the Gospels became enormous voices in Acts and beyond. James the Less probably became a leader in the Jerusalem church. Some traditions say he wrote the letter of James. Tradition sent him to Egypt, to Lower Egypt, the Nile Delta. He preached in Alexandria. He was deeply hated by parts of the city. He was stoned by an angry crowd in Egypt. Some traditions say he was then sawn in half. His symbol in church art is a fuller's saw. He says nothing in the record. He dies anyway. That is its own kind of testimony. Thaddeus, also called Jude, sometimes called Lebbaeus. The Gospels cannot seem to settle on one name for him. He has exactly one recorded line in the Gospel. At the Last Supper he asked Jesus, "Lord, why will you show yourself to us and not to the world?" Pentecost, the Spirit, the flame above the head. Tradition says he wrote the short letter at the back of your New Testament. Jude, 1 chapter, 25 verses. He went north and east to Edessa in modern Turkey, then on to Mesopotamia and Persia. Eusebius records that Thaddeus healed King Abgar of Edessa. Abgar became one of the first Christian kings in history. He partnered with Simon the Zealot for the Persian mission. They confronted Persian Magi priests. They lost no debate. Tradition says Thaddeus was clubbed to death in Persia. His symbol is a club and a flame. He is the patron saint of lost causes. Because his name was so easily confused with Judas Iscariot, for centuries no one prayed to him. Praying to him became a kind of last resort. Simon the Zealot, the most politically explosive of the 12. The Zealots were a violent political faction. They wanted Rome out of Judea by any means. Knives, assassinations, open revolt. And Jesus invited a zealot to follow him, and he sat at the same table with Matthew the tax collector, the collaborator. They were political opposites who would have killed each other on a Jerusalem street 6 months earlier. Jesus put them at the same table for 3 years. He preached at Pentecost in fluent Cappadocian. The languages were not the miracle. The political enemies sitting beside each other were the miracle. He partnered with Thaddeus for the Persian mission. They walked thousands of miles together. He preached in Babylon, in Persia, in the heart of the empire that had once destroyed Jerusalem. They confronted the same Magi priest. He was killed alongside Thaddeus. Some traditions say sawn in half. Others say crucified. His symbol is a fuller's saw and 2 crossed fish. Matthias, the replacement for Judas. The one Acts 1 picks by lot. He had followed Jesus from the very beginning. From the days when John the Baptist was still preaching at the Jordan, he had seen the resurrection appearances. He met the criteria the 11 set. Someone who had been with us from the baptism of John until the day Jesus was taken up. 2 candidates, Joseph called Barsabbas, and Matthias. The lot fell on Matthias. He became the 12th, the man who literally drew the short straw. He received the Spirit at Pentecost like all the rest. Tradition sent him to Cappadocia and the eastern shores of the Black Sea. He preached in mountain villages, in cave churches, among Greek and Cappadocian and Pontic peoples. Tradition says he was stoned, then beheaded. His relics are venerated at the Abbey of St. Matthias in Trier, Germany, the only apostle's tomb traditionally located in Germany. He is forgotten by most, but he was the 12th. He filled the empty seat, and he died for the man whose betrayer he replaced. Paul, he is the late entry, the 13th, the strangest one. His Hebrew name was Saul. His Greek name was Paul. He was a Pharisee, a scholar, a persecutor of the early church. The first time we see him in the New Testament, he is holding the cloaks of the men stoning Stephen, the first Christian martyr, on a road to Damascus, hunting more Christians. He was struck blind by a light. A voice asked him a question. "Why do you persecute me?" 3 days he sat in a Damascus room blind. No food, no water, just the question. An old Christian named Ananias laid hands on him. He could see again. The most relentless enemy of the church became its most relentless apostle. 3 missionary journeys. Through Asia Minor, through Greece, through every major city of the eastern Mediterranean. He preached on the Areopagus rock at Athens. He told a crowd of pagan philosophers about an unknown God whose temple they had already built. He wrote letters, 13 of them in your New Testament, half of them written from a Roman cell. He was shipwrecked off Malta, bitten by a viper. He shook it off and kept going. He was beheaded outside the walls of Rome on the Ostian Way, around 67 AD, probably under Nero. He gave us the entire theological architecture of the New Testament. Half of your New Testament is his letters. So here is the pattern. Of the original 12 disciples, 11 were martyred. Only John died of old age in his bed. Of the 13 counting Paul, 12 were executed, and they reached, between them, every major civilization of the ancient world: Britain, Spain, Greece, Egypt, Ethiopia, Mesopotamia, Persia, India. They went to every horizon they had a name for. These were not generals. They were not theologians. They were not politicians. Most could barely write. And here is the question I want you to sit. Who dies for what they know is a lie? The skeptic answers, nobody. Liars confess. Cult members recant under torture. The fact that not one of these men, under torture, in a foreign land, in their final hour, ever said it did not happen, tells you something. They were not theologians. They were eyewitnesses. They saw something, and they were willing to die for it. Every single one. That is the apostle pattern.